Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I want to welcome Justin Kagan and Justin Comey Barrett to the courtroom, I suppose, in one sense, but to the hearing room in a very significant other sense. I also want to welcome Judge Dow, who has been so good to work with over the course of the last few years with respect to making sure that you had a sufficient budget not only to carry out your formal duties but also to protect the justices. Unfortunately, we put the cart before the horse. We marked up the fiscal year 27 bill in subcommittee and then marked it up in full committee before we had hearings to inform us on the facts which would make the budget decisions more credible. Now we are having two hearings today from witnesses about their funding request in that bill that we passed. We should have started with those hearings. We also should be hearing from Treasury and DOJ too. We did hear from OMB, at which time Director Vogt informed us that he intended to have no oversight of the damage done by DOJ. Mr. Chairman, as you know, I think we must have such hearings ourselves. As has been widely noted, this is the first time the Supreme Court justices are testifying before a House committee since 2019. We appreciate this opportunity. Such hearings used to be the norm. From 1960 to 2022, there were 93 appearances by at least one sitting Supreme Court justice every year. This is a budget hearing to fulfill our duty to appropriate the people's taxes responsibly. I imagine that the questions will go beyond the fiscal to the fundamental. Both are proper, in my view, but in the case of the court's essential independence, difficult. I want to begin this discussion today, though, on the budget by noting that the very real threats faced by our judiciary, which the chairman has mentioned, is in our mind. According to the U.S. Marshal Service, more than 200 federal judges have had threats made against them in this fiscal year alone. With a deeply divided country and increasingly violent rhetoric being directed at judges, Congress must provide sufficient funding to ensure the safety of all judicial personnel. The FSSGG bill, already advanced by the Appropriations Committee, would provide $9.62 billion for the judiciary and $207 million for the Supreme Court itself. That's a 4.8% and 7.3% increase, respectively. Included in the bill is a $28.9 million increase for court security. At the same time, while we take measures to protect the physical safety of judges and court staff, Congress also has a responsibility to safeguard the independence of our judiciary and its ability to protect the constitutional rights of all Americans. Part of that is making certain that there is adequate funding for the public defenders, and I'm glad that we were able to address the budget shortfall for defenders serving in fiscal year 26. In fiscal 27, the committee supported funding defender services at $1.79 billion, with an increase of $26 million over the last year. That is a constitutional responsibility both the courts and Congress have. The rule of law depends on a judiciary that is properly funded, especially now when we need a strong judiciary to protect Americans from the imposition of a theory, in my view, of executive supremacy. This administration is routinely engaging in conduct that tests the limits of our Constitution. We must remember that our republic is a three-legged stool. The Congress, the executive, the judiciary. I believe that each branch must be held accountable by the other two, as well as that each branch has a constitutional duty to protect the constitutionally granted powers of the other two. The American people whom we represent expect the Supreme Court and all our federal courts to play its constitutional role as a transparent and neutral arbiter of the law. Just as we in Congress must do our duty to hold the executive and judicial branches accountable, so too must the court carry out its responsibility to keep an overreaching executive or legislature in check without overreaching itself. At the same time, I believe the court has a responsibility to guard against the executive subverting the Article I powers of the Congress. from usurpation by the executive. That was the founder's genius of separation of powers and the assurance of checks and balances. That is how America's judiciary maintains the trust of the people and prevents constitutional crisis. As John Adams said, we are a nation of laws, not of men. Maintaining the checks and balances to ensure that precept prevails remains the difficult but necessary job of each of the branches. In doing so, each branch will earn the structural deference our founders intended, and they believed essential to perpetuate the democratic republic they so ably constructed. Justices, I thank you and your 7 colleagues for the work that you do, and I look forward to this hearing and what you have to say today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Support journalism you trust. Support PBS News. Donate now, or even better, start a monthly contribution today.